It's official, Elon Musk buys Twitter, and the world erupts in, well, all sorts of emotions, mixed emotions. I'm going to walk through my thoughts on this topic. Of course, Elon Musk needs no introduction, and he's done a lot of things, from PayPal to Tesla to SpaceX, you name it. But when it comes to Twitter, what is he all about? Why did he buy this company? Why is he taking it private? Well, in every interview he's ever done on this topic, he is pretty clear what his goals are. He thinks that in the modern ecosystem, the town square no longer is that physical piece of land you would go to. The town square is a social media platform like Facebook or Twitter. And Twitter is increasingly the town square of the elites. So whether we like it or not, the newspaper reporters are there, the people who work in government are there, the people in the academy are there. They're all there on Twitter giving their opinion and soaking in the opinion of others. And so Elon thinks it's an important place. I think he's right about that. And he thinks, of course, that what you want to have in a town square like this is you want to have a culture of free speech. I'll talk about the difference between the First Amendment and the culture of free speech. So I'll separate those two. He wants a culture of free speech where people feel like they can say what they're actually thinking and make the argument, and they can sometimes be right and sometimes be wrong and confront each other and disagree and have a spirited debate. He's pretty clear about that in all of his interviews. I think that many people are right, that what he means by that is that people who have an important role, like even former presidents like Donald Trump who've been booted off the platform, he's probably going to allow them back on the platform and allow a lot of people to say some things that the platform has hitherto not allowed. So he believes in the culture of free speech, and he wants to promote that, and he thinks that's important for democracy. So let's talk about this. Of course, my bias is that I interpret a lot of this through COVID-19. And when it comes to COVID-19, there has been censorship and the heavy hand of big tech. Of course, censorship is one thing, that the idea that you literally cannot talk about some topic or the other, but there are many, many insidious ways big technology companies can censor, or things short of censoring, speech or content or ideas. Those things could be, as someone pointed out recently, I think this was Jay Bhattacharya, that somebody could like a tweet of his, but then the next day it wouldn't register that they liked it, it would be unliked. Or that somebody could retweet something a lot, but not as many people would see it as if it had the more favorable or palatable content. Sometimes things can be shadow banned, so you don't see the replies for some people unless you click on that little thing at the bottom, or that some things show up less likely in rankings and preferences. And so the algorithms and these companies have tremendous power because they decide not only what are the things you absolutely cannot talk about, but also how much can we nudge it upward and downward, the things we want you to see more of and see less of. And I think Elon Musk has a problem with that. Now, that's in contrast with a speech given last week by former President Obama, about the importance of big tech in disinformation, misinformation, and the need for big tech to crack down on perverse and false ideas. He thinks that that's a good idea. We ought to do that. I want to separate a few things here. One, I think many times people get sucked into, well, does the First Amendment apply to Twitter, et cetera, et cetera? It's a private company, it's not government, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, the First Amendment is that government cannot infringe upon the speech of others. It's not that a private company can't regulate the sorts of things that it allows to be said on that platform. That's true. But America has always had the First Amendment, but it's also had a broader culture of free speech. And what does that mean? That means that, if somebody's doing their job and they happen to come in and they disagree with you on some political issue or some social issue, and, you say, okay, that's not a big deal. They're doing their job fine. We disagree on this issue. There's probably other people who disagree. I don't have to listen to everything they have to say. I can walk away from conversations I don't want to hear, but I'm not going to go out of my way to make a big deal out of it and to try to demonize this person and get this person fired, etc. Well, that culture has shifted a lot. We still have the First Amendment, but the culture is very different now. I always say that when I was in college, we didn't have the time or the energy to even know too much about who's speaking, and certainly not the energy or an interest to protest them. We had better things to do, like go get some drinks and have fun with friends. But now it seems like people have so much energy to protest somebody. Somebody says one little thing, you see a snapshot of it. You don't want to link to the full article or post because you don't want to encourage people to go there and possibly see that there's some nuance or that might not be exactly what they meant in the broader context. You don't allow the audience to do that. You just say it's bad. Thousands of people pile on, and instantly it's about where does this person work? Who is this person? Where do they live? What do they do? How can we put pressure on them to make their life miserable? That's not a culture of free speech. That's not the American culture. That's a really strange, puritanical, vengeful culture that nobody likes. Nobody likes that, and I think people on every side of every issue has been a victim of that, and I don't think many people like it. I think some people think it's an effective tactic for change, the change that they want. I think they're really misguided because what they are achieving is a set of Pyrrhic victories. It looks as if things are going your way because you've knocked a few people out of jobs because they disagree with views you hold. But what you really are doing is seeding a deep undercurrent of resentment against your own view, and it's very likely to come back and whip you in the face very soon. So when you really oppose a culture of free speech, I think what you do is you drive ideas you disagree with into the underground, and then they fester and they grow and they gain adherence, and when they have a moment and a moment of strength, they will vote for a person who strongly disagrees with you and will set the agenda the other way. They'll do things just to screw with you because they don't like the way you've been treating them. I've always felt that if you really want to get somebody to come around on your policy position, you got to persuade them, and that isn't easy. That often requires listening to what they have to say, even when you disagree with it. I've spent so many times listening to people who thought pharmaceutical drug pricing was A-okay, just to understand, why do they think that? Why do they believe that? And every once in a while, they'd give me a clue. Well, I believe that because we think, and they'd say what it is. We think that if you lower the price, you'd stifle innovation or something like that. And then you can take that little nugget. Oh, they think that, don't they? Well, let me think of a clever way that I might use available data to show them that that is wrong. They're misguided about it. And every so often, when you do it really well, you actually do change their mind. And to preserve their ego, often people don't admit that you changed their mind. They just act like they believed what you told them all along. They revise their understanding of what happened. So I think that's the importance of a free culture of speech where we can say what we want and we don't always persecute people, even if they don't say exactly what we want. And we're also the right to ignore, which is a right that is, underused these days. If somebody says something you disagree with, you hate it, you don't like it, the best thing you can do is ignore it. It'll die a silent death because people are talking all the time in the world of online and very few things are gaining a lot of traction. So I think Elon actually does, like many people from the original wave of the internet, believe in truly uncensored free speech, that people can say things that, you think are wrong or stupid or you disagree with. And that should be permitted. And we can't use the heavy hand of the platform to squelch it. I think President Obama's remarks suggest that he thinks the opposite. He thinks these platforms have an important role to shape that. But what I always ask myself, for the people who hold President Obama's view, which I would disagree with, I always ask myself, right now things are going in your direction. Let's be honest, the majority of tech workers at these companies are on your team. They're on the liberal team. They're on the liberal side of things, as am I, by the way. I'm on that side too. We're all on the same side and things are going our way and the things we believe in are getting more and more traction, it appears, on the platforms, and we're censoring the things that we don't like and we're censoring the people we don't like. The past presidents from the other party get censored more than the past presidents from our party. Sure, things are going our way. But what will happen if it ever flipped? What will happen if we weren't the ones who were running the companies and then the other side had more people in the companies, or the other side had somehow had a strong government position and they made impositions on the platform and they said, we're going to step in and help you out a little bit on what's misinformation. We'll tell you what's misinformation. And the moment you imagine what would happen if the other side, the side that you disagree with, held that power, you start to see why this is a very dangerous power. Because what is information and misinformation is very, very gray. Of course, there's black and white examples. We can always think of the black and white, but life is the gray. And, information, people always say, you're entitled to your opinion, you're not entitled to your old facts. What they don't realize is that opinions and facts are much more similar than you think, because the way in which you frame a fact, what is your numerator, what is your denominator, how are you making the comparison, what's the precise way you're framing the question, that is all part of your own bias and your view and often riddled with your opinion. And so two people can present facts, but one fact can be very misleading and then the other fact can be very true. And a misleading fact can often be as malicious as something that's just categorically wrong. But how do you separate misleading facts from things that are categorically wrong to things that, are kind of true, but there's unpleasant truths, to things that are cherry-picked, etc.? And the answer is, it's impossible. That's the gray of life. That's why we need to have the free discourse and the debates, so that we can hear it all and try to think of ways to poke holes in the other side's argument. But the moment you allow the platform to have the brute force to exterminate or extinguish things that the platform, or the people who run the platform in the moment, think are wrong, you give a great power to them. And what happens is, when things are going your way, as President Obama may feel like the platform will probably make things better for us, I think it's easy to be seduced by that. But imagine what happens when your political opponent gets a hold of that power. They can easily use it against you and against you and against you. And the thing is, just a little bit of this power, and you can create a spiral where you just solidify your own power, stay in power, change the narrative, stay in power, and thus you have cemented a permanent legacy of power. And that's the worry. That's the worry. That's what happens when you don't have a culture of free speech. Now, when it comes to COVID-19, why do I think this is salient? Because people spoke in very grandiose terms. Everything was misinformation or disinformation. I make a joke that, Trump was the first actually to coin fake news. Whenever he said he saw something that conflicted with what he wanted people to believe or that was not a palatable fact about him, he said, that's fake news. That's fake news. You're a fake news organization just putting out your fake news. And so fake news, noun, it is information that prevents Republicans from winning. Well, now on the other side, there's misinformation and disinformation. Noun, information that prevents Democrats from winning. And a lot of the things that people say were misinformation were no such thing. They were just things that people found inconvenient, such as, is it possible that this virus that appeared in Wuhan, the city with the laboratory, might have escaped from the laboratory? Is that even possible? And they said, you know what? It's racist to even assume that to even suggest that it's possible. We shouldn't really even talk about it. We shouldn't investigate it. And that dialogue is squelched. We're not allowing you to talk about it. That's what Facebook said. And of course, then Don McNeil, the reporter, Nick Wade, broke these really big stories where they said, look, there's more to this than just the categorical. This is wrong to even entertain. And that's a huge, important moment. That's a cataclysmic moment. That one instance should give us all pause that the culture of free speech is really, really important. Now, this isn't government prohibition on speech. It's Facebook prohibiting what's on their own private platform. But it's against the culture of free speech that they would do such a thing. And it was a huge error. We lost 1 year of a needed dialogue. We literally prevented people from talking about that in the town square. And that's a huge problem. And we saw this for so many other things. I think it was Angry Cardiologist who made a tweet comparing vaccine-induced myocarditis from COVID-induced myocarditis. That tweet was marked as misleading by the brilliant folks at Twitter, of course, but it was later found to be 100% correct and supported by publications in Nature Medicine and a preprint that's based on that publication, at least in some age groups and for some doses and for some products. Is it correct overall? That's a very tough question, but you need to have that discussion so you can see. We're talking about Moderna. We're talking about dose 2. We're talking about a 28-day delay for dose 2, and we're talking about an 18-year-old man. And that's under that circumstance, Angry Cardiologist tweet is correct. Okay, and then we're also talking about what is the definition of myocarditis. That's also something that reasonable people can disagree on. Do you need to see MRI abnormalities? Is it okay to have demand ischemia in the setting of critical illness? Is that a COVID-induced myocarditis, or is that merely demand ischemia in the setting of critical illness? These are nuances to this. Who are these platforms to decide? They don't have, no platform could ever possibly employ smart enough people to police all these things because these things are very, very technical. And as somebody who spent, 15 years in biomedicine, working his way up the academic ladder, I can tell you that there are a lot of things that are much grayer than people think. From cancer screening to genomics to vaccine policies to all these broad social things, there is nuance. It is uncertain. There is gray. You need to allow people to talk about these things. And I think that's what Elon grasps. And that's why I think, do I know he's going to do a perfect job? No. But am I pleased with the principles he's espoused? Yes. And if I must say to my liberal colleagues, and of course, I must address, that's the key issue. I think they're the ones who have put up the most resistance about what Elon will do. And I think they're the ones who it's currently in the zeitgeist that they believe that if we allow the platforms to prohibit some types of speech, it will work to create the type of speech that we like and the type of progress that we want to see. I think that's how they feel, genuinely. And I urge them to think beyond the present moment. I think it's true. In the present moment, you do have the alignment among these companies and among these points of view. You will get what you think you'll get, but that moment won't be there forever. And I can promise you, the first thing a shrewd tactician on the other side will think is, this is not going well for us. They are censoring things preferentially that hurt our political cause. We'll wait our time. We'll wait for that moment that we come into political power. And then we're going to pass a new law that says, you know what? We need direct government enforcement of these companies and algorithms. And we're going to have government help these algorithms decide what's truth and fiction. And they're going to very quickly flip it the other way around. And so when I see things like the Surgeon General say, we can go help Facebook identify the miscreants and the misinformation people, be very careful if you think a White House official should be telling Facebook who the misinformation people are, because guess what's going to happen? The moment it's somebody that you don't want in there, they're going to do the same thing. But who's to say they're going to play by any rules at all? They're going to do whatever they think is best. Just like you, to some degree, do whatever you think is best. And you have ignored a lot of real things, such as, the moment vaccine effectiveness goes very low, the ethical case for mandates dissipates. And yet that's something that people want to push back on, So I think, you got to be very careful. There's no such thing as a true fact. I think that's a misconception about science. I wish there were the case that we would all agree on the sensible numerators, denominators. I personally think that, the reason that my arguments are sometimes compelling is that I actually try to articulate good reasons for why I'm picking my premises, but we can all pick our premises. And that's part of what it means to be science, to convince others that the way you have framed the question is also important and valid. And in fact, a lot of science is, a lot of the really tough stuff in science is that you literally frame the questions in that space. And as someone who's done a lot of work in sort of surrogate validity, I can tell you that probably people won't even recognize, but some of those papers that we did on surrogate validity has literally framed the way every single person, both proponent and critic of my work, thinks about that issue. We have literally got them thinking on the landscape that we wanted them to think on. We framed the rules for that debate, and that's really important. That's a powerful thing. But you need a fair ground for that. You need a platform for that. That's part of what it means to be a scientist. And that's part of the scientific process, actually, framing the way in which we conceptualize science. And if you give these platforms the power to decide who's the winner and who's, wrong, they're not just going to be calling balls and strikes. There's no such thing. They're going to be defining what the strike zone is, and they're going to be constantly shifting that. And I think it's really problematic. And so what do I think about Elon? I mean, we will find out what he's going to do. But if he intends to do what he said he's going to do, which is that he believes this is an important space, this is the space people speak in now, and that, we are going to have a light touch and err on the side of letting things stay there, then I think he's probably right. Even if that means I also will end up seeing things that I also don't like. I'm happy to do that. And by the way, these people who pretend, I have to say this, the people who pretend that you go on Twitter and you never encounter something you don't like, have you used that? The whole thing is things you don't like to see or read. Somehow the algorithm might even be preferentially suggesting things you hate to you to gain your attention, but it's full of garbage all the time. So the little bits of garbage you think they can somehow sweep up, good luck with that. It's much more likely to be abused than it is to be of any validity. So Elon, I think, has the right sentiment. Will he be able to carry it through? I don't know. I'm willing to give him a shot. Will someone else? Would it have been worse without him? Almost surely, yes. We saw the direction Twitter was going. Are people going to quit the platform? I doubt it. They talk a big game. I'm going to quit. And, just like I was guilty of saying that if the people I don't like get elected, I'm going to leave the country. But it's a lot harder to do that when you actually have to face that decision. And the truth is that the platform, and the reason he bought it, I suspect, is he realizes it has a bit of a founder effect advantage. So many people use it, and so it has already gained in the popular consciousness. It's hard to totally displace it with something novel. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I'll give him a shot. I'm not forced to use it. I can go elsewhere, but I do think, and the only reason I stay is that it is the one social media tool that is preferentially seen by people in the media and people in the academy, and it is important to try to influence that, even if sometimes you feel like it's an uphill task, because it was for parts of the pandemic. But it's changing. The dynamic is constantly shifting, and sometimes you start to get your wins, and history is long, and it often is self-corrective, and so we might yet see some progress on these issues, and those are the issues that I think are important. I don't know everything about all issues, but I know a lot about biomedicine and about medical evidence, and that's what I think is most important. And I was upset with the way in which the scientific dialogue was curtailed by these companies that just don't have the ability to referee these kinds of debates. So, those are my thoughts on this issue. Those are my thoughts on, the First Amendment, which is a very narrow thing that applies to some things, and a broader American culture of free speech that, when I was growing up in the 1980s, we embraced. We actually thought it was a good thing. And I can't tell you how many times when I was in my teens and 20s that I heard somebody say something that I thought was offensive, either to me or to someone else, and it was a little bit tone deaf or out of place, and some things were just wrong and absurd, and some things were, terrible. But I just cannot even recall an instance where I or anyone I ever knew actually went out of their way to try to make life harder for such a person. They realize that, this person, although clueless and tone deaf and maybe a buffoon, they represent other people. And, I guess, if I really cared deeply about this issue, I'd have to try to figure out a way to flip some of these votes. But going and pursuing one person with vigor to make their life difficult, to block them on these platforms, to throw them off the platform, to silence them, to get them fired from their job, that's just a waste of my time and also not productive for anything I believe in. We used to think that, and now somehow we are totally warped. I don't know where people get the time to even to investigate or care. I just don't understand how you could even have such time. Maybe I'm just too busy with other things. But, that's the demise of the culture of free speech, and I think Elon is trying to push that back. And so, Godspeed. I wish you the best. I wish he does it. I hope he does it. I hope he does a good job, and I hope he does what he said he's going to do, have a light touch. And I hope people realize, I hope the pendulum swings on this issue, actually. I hope that the cultural pendulum swings and we all realize that, having some people be wrong sometimes and some people say things we don't agree with is much better than living in a world where some third party of unnamed entity decides what's truth and fiction. It's much better to let people be wrong than entrust this power to people who aren't qualified to wield it. And of course, the power will rapidly be misused. So that's what you get on this channel. These kinds of analyses. Like, subscribe, comment below. I have been looking at that recently. I see some interesting things. Leave a message. Follow this channel. Send this video to a friend, recommend this channel. Check out the podcast plenary session, the audio version. There's some other stuff in there occasionally. Go to my Substack and subscribe. I had a long piece on this Obama speech. I thought it was quite interesting. I think that's it. If you're interested in the academic papers, you can go to my Twitter account, VK Prasad Lab, and look through that. I also have a website, myname.com, papers tab. We try to keep all the published papers available there. There should be over 300 there for you to peruse, mostly about cancer drug policy, evidence-based medicine. All right, on that positive note, until next time.